Some may find the following disturbing. Discretion is advised.
Welcome, everybody, to a new edition of Gabriel Talks Football. My name is Aldo Gandia, and I just want to let you know that this is the last Gabriel Talks Football for a few weeks, as I'm heading on vacation. We'll find out if Greg is going to do vacation. But just want to alert you that you don't have to worry. The Chicago Bears content is still going to flow from the barroom. And in fact, we have a new show debuting today at 10 p.m. Central. Jordan Silvera will debut Bare Necessities. He's going to look at some tape of Larry Borum and talk about some strategy and all sorts of great things. So hopefully you can join him live and interact with him in the chat room. And if not, that show, like all of our shows, will be on demand here on YouTube and will also be distributed through our audio podcast channels. Let me welcome in Greg right now. Greg, how are you, my friend? And
I am wonderful. How are you?
You look wonderful. Did you do your workout this morning?
Absolutely.
Of course you did. I keep looking at that picture of you with your muscles flexing.
No, I had to do a deposition 2 days ago, and that did not have me in a good mood. Because the guy I'm always against, and I won't mention names because he'd turn around and sue me. But what a asshole.
Yeah, you have clued me in on some of the confidence the two of you. Right. I won't say anything more than that, but it's an interesting kind of rivalry that you guys have built.
Oh, yeah. I can't wait till the next one.
Maybe when we do your tell-all book, we can share those stories with everyone else. By the way, are you going on vacation this summer? Are you going anywhere special with the wife?
I want to get up to Buffalo. I haven't been to Buffalo in 2.5 years because of COVID and stuff. So I want to get there sometime. In fact, my good buddy went up. He was there in June. His mother-in-law's in Rochester, which is an hour away. And there was an outing from a golf outing from my high school. So he went to it, and there was like 110 guys from there, mostly from the classes when I was there. So I would have known a lot of people. He said he knew at least 60 out of the 110 people. So there's another one. They have 2 a year. There's another one in August. So I am going to try to go to that. It's right in the middle of the week. So it should be easy to get to.
I would imagine the weather in Buffalo in August would be really nice, huh?
Yeah. Buffalo summers are great. It has this notoriety of being cold and snowy. Yeah, it gets snowy because you get lake effect snow. Right. You're on the east side of the lake. But it doesn't get anywhere near as cold as here. I mean, not even close. I mean, we get a lot of days where it gets below zero or in single digits. You seldom see that in Buffalo. But then in the summer, the Lake Erie almost acts as a built-in air conditioner, and it keeps the temperatures a little bit milder. So like those high 90 days, low 100 days like we had last week or the week before, and we'll probably have before the summer's over, you don't get those. You might get 3 or 4 low 90 days, but the majority of the summer's in the 80s.
Jordan wants to know if you've got a favorite spot to pick up wings when you're in Buffalo.
Oh God, there's a million spots.
Anyone that has a special recipe that you particularly adore?
Well, they started at a place called now it's the Anchor Bar. I was eluding my name, and what it was is the people who own the Anchor Bar. Their son was a Buffalo cop, and he used to, when he got off shift, he'd bring other cops in with him. The place was closed. And mom would nobody ate chicken wings. This goes back to the 1970s. She'd take the chicken wings and fry them up with a special sauce. And these guys loved it, and then it caught on. And so I'm going to say it was right around the time, right when I was around getting out of college. So in that 1973, 74, 75 area.
Mm-hmm.
And, since then it's grown. But they're all good. You got to have them deep fried now. If they're not deep fried and full of cholesterol and ready to kill you, then they aren't any good. They're not done right. A baked chicken wing is crap compared to the way that it's supposed to be.
Yeah. Well,
dripping in fat.
The last time I was in Buffalo was probably around 25 years ago, and it was in the fall. And boy, it was football weather. It was cold and gloomy looking. And
when were you there? November?
I was there in November. Yes.
Yeah, it can get a little chilly.
Yeah, 2004, 5. Nice town, but man, it was gloomy.
Well, I wanted right around in that time because I was living here.
Mm-hmm.
They had a freak lake effect snowstorm. Some front went through at the end of October and dumped probably 15 inches of snow on the area. And I mean, it destroyed because trees still had their leaves on them. And then all the weight from the snow and the leaves had destroyed just a ton of trees and stuff, especially at golf courses and stuff. It took a while to recover from that.
Yeah. Oh, man, that sucks. By the way, you ever see a movie called Buffalo 66?
Heard about it, but I never saw it.
Yeah, it is the most bizarre movie. It's a psychosexual drama, but this one guy's his family, they live in Buffalo, and every Sunday they put in their VHS tape of the Buffalo Bills' first Super Bowl game, the one that they lost because of the missed field goal, and they relive it, and they relive it in a way where they actually think it's happening live, and so that euphoric throughout the game, and then the misery that they go through after and throughout the week, the sting of having lost that game. And it's kind of a metaphor, I think, for living in Buffalo. I don't know what the filmmaker was thinking.
I was at that game because
where are you?
Well, it was against the Giants. I was working for the Giants.
Oh, that's right. You told me you got the free tickets from the Giants.
Well, I had, in fact, that was our second Super Bowl. Buffalo's first. And it was a freak thing because for some odd reason there was only a week between the championship games and the Super Bowl, and there were tickets galore. And on top of that, you had the Gulf War going on.
Oh yeah,
and they can't the league canceled the commissioners' party, and a lot of the events that were usually part of Super Bowl week were all canceled. They had real heavy security. In fact, if you see videos of that game, there's helicopter gunships flying around the stadium the entire game. And hey, anyway,
let me interrupt you quickly. Jiggle that microphone a little bit because we're getting a little static when you talk.
How about that? A little better.
Go the right part by your right shoulder where the microphone is. Yeah, jiggle that around a little bit. There you go.
Okay,
that's excellent. Okay, thank you.
So I took a lot of my family the first Super Bowl, so that was January '87. So 4 years previous, we played Denver out of Pasadena at the Rose Bowl, and then this one I took a lot of my ex-wife's family. So we're sitting next to my father-in-law is sitting next to me and coming up to that field goal, and he goes, "I hope he makes it." And I just looked at him. I go, "If he makes it or misses it, it's a difference of a lot of money to me. And you hope he makes it?"
That's funny. That's funny. All right. Well, let's turn our attention now to our Chicago Bears because hopefully they're going to win and make us a lot of money somehow, some way. We have, over the last several shows, been evaluating this roster that the team is going to take to training camp. And the one position area, of course, that we have saved for last, because there's really no debate as to who's going to be the number one quarterback on this team. It is, of course, Justin Fields. But that wanted to talk about the overall room and also what your expectations are for Justin Fields. Now, the overall room is, of course, Justin Fields, the second-year man out of Ohio State. The number 2 quarterback is expected to be Trevor Siemian, who is now a 7-year journeyman. I think this is his 5th or 6th team that he has been in the league. He's got lots of experience. And Nathan Peterman, who I saw play in the Senior Bowl. Wow, he's in 6th year in the league. So that was 6 years ago. I saw him play in the Senior Bowl, and he did not impress. I thought he'd never make an NFL roster, but in fact, he has stuck around, and kudos to him. Overall, what do you think about the quarterback room before we start talking about each quarterback specifically?
Well, let's start with the 2 backups, and then we'll get into Justin. I think Trevor Siemian is an ideal backup. He's played a lot of games in the league already, and it's in his 7-year career. Well, this will be a 7th year. Very smart guy, went to Northwestern. He's got good mobility. He doesn't have Justin Fields' mobility, but who the hell does? And, he's going to get you out of a game. And if you have to play him for a couple games because of injury, he can do it. So, and he knows and understands that backup role and accepts it. You got to have that right. You got to have the right brain going, so to speak, to accept that role. Because some guys, want to be the starter. And I'm sure he wants to be a starter, but he knows now 7 years in the league, he knows what his career is in the National Football League, and that's to be a backup quarterback. And you know what? That's the best damn job in football. You're not going to make $15 million a year or $20 million like the quarterback, but you're going to make $5 to $7 million a year. You're not going to get hit unless somebody gets hurt.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you don't get dirty. That's a great job.
It certainly is.
You got to be prepared. But tell you, the backup quarterback, he's got to be heady, because he's not getting very many reps. He gets very limited reps during the week when they're putting the game plan together. Yet at the same time, he's got to be mentally prepared to play the game if, in fact, the starter goes down.
Mm-hmm.
So that's key to being that backup quarterback. Now, Nathan Peterman. It's funny you just said you didn't like him at the Senior Bowl. I remember watching with Pitt that year, and I liked him. I thought he had some moxie to him and won some tough games. And then he gets drafted by Buffalo, and I thought, this guy's got a chance. And this was obviously before Josh Allen came around. And the starter gets hurt, and I don't remember who the starter was, and he's got to go in. And he throws 2 interceptions, neither of which were his fault on the road. And then he comes back to Buffalo and plays the game, and he throws a bunch more interceptions. And again, none of which were, I think one was his fault. And, some of them were tip balls, drop balls, types of things where the receiver dropped the ball and then it goes into the hands of the defender type thing. And it just killed this guy's confidence. And then the media, of course, killed him. And he needed a change of scenery, and they let him go. And he'd been to a couple teams. He was a backup out with the Raiders, and actually had some success when he had to play. And I'm going to go with my initial thinking on Nate Peterman. I think as a number 3, you'd be hard pressed to find a lot better better guys in the league right now.
I bet
he's got experience. Now the key is how many are they going to keep on the roster? There's not a 4th. Ideally, you'd like put your 3rd on the practice squad and then bring them up if you have to. But then if 2 guys go down during the game and you don't have a 3rd, you're SOL.
Yes.
So. Yeah, personally, I'd rather have 3, and then he's dressed. He's your 46th guy,
right?
But he cannot play unless the first 2 guys get hurt,
right?
And I know he can get you out of a game. Another guy, he's not going to get any reps. The most of the reps he's going to get is going to be during the preseason. In fact, I wouldn't be a bit surprised. You'll probably see Justin Fields play a little in the opening preseason game, but you're going to see mostly the 2 backups, Siemian and Peterman, in that opening game.
Yeah, and overall, I I'm with you. I think this is a strong quarterback room for, given, of course, that there's a dearth of quarterbacks in the National Football League. I'm not sure there are good 32 starting quarterbacks in the National Football League. And so if you can land a backup tandem of Simeon and Peterman, that's not a bad thing.
No, and you know what? You got three really smart guys. Now let's talk about Justin. He's got some special talent. Did some really good things last year, and there was times when he didn't look so good. I don't really know if it was all his fault. When you look at especially that first game against Cleveland, look at the game plan, how he was used, wasn't necessarily used to his strengths. Had a weak receiving core. The offensive line struggled because of injuries. But again, even if you have all those problems and you game plan correctly, you got a chance. And it just, hearing stuff after the fact now, I think that he is going to be a lot better within this scheme. And the beauty of at least the first part of the season, the first couple games, because nobody else can have any tape. And we've talked about this before. They're going to study Green Bay tape, and they're going to study San Francisco tape, because that's basically the same type of offense. But they don't know how Luke Getsy's going to call plays, or they don't know exactly how the Bears are going to use Justin Fields. Are they going to have him playing from the pocket? Are they going to have him doing some rollouts? Those types of things. And so until the opposing teams get some real tape, and the preseason isn't going to count.
Right.
So until they get some tape, real live game action, that's advantage Bears, at least for the first couple games.
Well, and we have to talk about Justin's athletic ability, because that's one of the traits that puts him far above most quarterbacks in the league. And the pièce de resistance of his rookie season was this play against San Francisco on a 4th down and 1. It's a busted play, and he creates here in a maestro fashion, getting into the end zone and getting the Bears back into this game. Oh, look at this, a commercial. Let's see. It's for a T-shirt. I need T-shirts.
Where the hell did you get that?
It just popped in. NFL.com wants their money.
Okay.
But here it is on the overhead view.
No, that was a hell of a play on his part. And he had a number of those. I mean, he's got that ability, rare ability, and probably as good ability, if not the best ability. Maybe Lamar Jackson might be the only one better that can really create and make plays with his feet. And any defense has got to account for that. And so now, granted, you don't want him to run as much as he's taken off in the past, but at the same time, because of that rare athleticism. Now look at Buffalo. They run Josh Allen a lot. I mean, he's been their second leading rusher like forever since he's been on the team. But now he's a lot bigger. He's 6'5", and he's probably 250 pounds, where Fields is probably 225 to 230. But Fields he's not a small guy. He's a big guy.
Yeah.
And he can take a hit. You just don't want him to take a hit. Nice. So, it's a matter of, when you do run, being smart, sliding, go out of bounds so you don't have to take a hit and put yourself into a situation where you can get an injury.
How has that changed over years of evaluating quarterbacks? I mean, I remember as a kid, it's the traditional, you want your 6'5", 6'6" Burt Jones, Peyton Manning type guy who had a strong arm out of the pocket. And then over the years, the game started to change a bit, and you had all these mobile quarterbacks in college. But I kept saying to myself, there's no way these guys can last in the NFL. They're just going to you can't run around like that in the NFL and expect to have a long career. But has that changed in that?
Well, you got better athletes playing the position. Okay. So the game always evolves. The game's always changing. And so if you can get a guy let's talk about Lamar Jackson. He struggled in college. You look at his passing stats, and him throwing at Louisville, he was all over the place.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But the one thing he could do is create with his feet and keep plays alive with his feet. And he's learned to become a better than adequate passer. I don't think he's ever going to be a great passer, but he's become, mid 50s, maybe even low 60%. I don't know what his stats are from last year, but when you look at college, it was low 50s. How Josh Allen was low 50s in college, and that's what was a big question with him. Big athletic guy, but a lot of it has to do with football character and how hard they work at the game, and how do they want to become great players.
Mm-hmm.
And both of those guys do want to become great players, and they've got some rare talent. And Josh Allen, you just seen, he was this kind of quiet country boy from rural California when he came to the Bills as a rookie.
Mm-hmm.
And now he's real brash. I mean, I don't know if you watched the golf match with him and Tom Brady and that guy up north. And he gives them as much shit as anybody. I mean, he's like, and you could tell he does not like Tom Brady.
Mm.
And probably because Brady played for New England for so long, and when they were at New England, they own the Bills. But right now, the Bills own New England. The last few years.
That is true. Yeah, I didn't see the match, but I saw some of the social media interaction and some of the highlights. This young guy from Buffalo, he's quite the character, and he could be the next superstar quarterback, kind of take over the mantle from Tom Brady. Unless Justin Fields does, of course. So we'll see about that.
Well, there's room for more than one. I mean, you got Brady, you got the guy in Kansas City. There's a lot of good quarterbacks out there.
Mm-hmm. Yep. People in the chat room, please continue on with the questions. I will collect them, and we'll get to our Q&A segment a little later. Thanks for that. So realistic expectations for year 2 for Justin Fields. I get a little concerned because everything is new offensive line, new play calling, new scheme, new playbook, new wide receivers. Everything is new. And my experience is that quarterbacks usually take a little time. We've heard it here in Chicago. It takes 3 years to learn this offense. We hear from every head coach, and in 3 years they're gone. But
I don't know if it takes 3 years to learn this offense.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this offense that they're running is actually a pretty common scheme within the league. The Rams use it, the 49ers use it,
mm-hmm.
Green Bay obviously uses it. It's all a derivative of Mike Shanahan's offense when he was in Denver. Then his son had it, and his son taught it to the LA coach. McVay, when McVay was under him in Washington, and LaFleur was with him, I think, down in Atlanta. So there's a lot of teams that use it. So you're using how the terminology differs from Nagy's terminology. I don't know. That's the big thing. Everybody runs similar type plays.
Mm-hmm.
It's the terminology and learning the terminology. And once you get that down, then it becomes pretty easy. I think in reality, it can be harder for receivers because receivers got to make sight adjustments,
mm-hmm.
and that they got to be able to read a defense or read a coverage on the run, mm-hmm. and not slow down. They got to go do it at full speed, and depending what the coverage is, tells them what route. They might have 2 or 3 different options in a route depending on what the coverage is, and you got to be able to do it at full speed. And that's what separates guys coming into the league and being outstanding at that position or being average, because it just takes them a while to adjust to that pro route tree and the adjustments as compared to what they were doing in college. In fact, I was I do some evaluation for one of the sports agencies, and I was doing a receiver right before I did this show. And I wrote it up, and I just said, it's going to take him a while His where he goes to school and the route tree he has at that school. I mean, it's just so simple as compared to what you're asking an NFL receiver to do, that it's going to take him a while to adjust. Now, what you don't know when you're looking at tape is what's upstairs. You know, how smart is he to be able to pick these things up, right, and again, be able to do it at full speed. So I'll go back. It's a change in an adjustment for the quarterback, but if he works at it, he's going to get it. Like I said, I think it could be harder for the receivers than it can be for the quarterback.
We've talked about this running back room, and we're impressed by it. We like the names in there. We like the talent in there. We like the potential that's in there. I know that you are an evaluator of talent first, but in terms of scheme, would you like to see the Bears, like Lovey used to say, come off the bus and run the ball?
Yeah, I think in reality is a lot of teams want to do that, and they say they're going to do it, but then they don't.
Yeah, like
and it's and the key really is who's calling the plays, who's got the play card in his hand, and is the guy calling the plays, and he's the guy that has to make the right decisions, and he's the guy who's got to dab. You want to run the ball? He's got to have in his mind that we're going to run the ball. Too many people, they start to run the ball in the first quarter. They don't have success, and then they get away from it. And what you might not have success in the first quarter, you got to keep pounding and keep pounding. And sooner or later, you're going to have success in the game. Might take until the second half, but the game's 4 quarters.
But the key thing is that the defense keeps you in the game.
That's right. You got to have the game short. But, if you're falling down behind 17 points, 21 points, now you got to throw the ball. But at the same time, if you can be close in that game score-wise, your defense is doing a good job. Keep pounding that pill, and you're going to have success in the second half.
The Chicago Bears team record for touchdown passes thrown, I believe, belongs to Jay Cutler in the 2014 season when he threw 28. Is it too much to hope for? Maybe, I don't want to use the word hope, but is it too much to say if I was going to Vegas and I was going to lay a bet and say, Greg, I'm going to throw $1,000 on him beating that record, would you say I'm stupid, or would you say that, it's a good bet, give it a shot?
I'm going to give you an answer that you're not expecting.
Okay.
Get a long-term weather forecast that's accurate.
I see where you're going.
Because there's going to be games. You've been at Soldier Field when the wind's blowing.
Oh yes.
you can't throw the ball.
That's right.
So there was times when Mitchell was the quarterback here, and he'd start off the season and say, hey, he's going to throw for 4,000 yards, and he's going to have 33, 34 TDs. And then you get to that second half of the season, and you get into some bad weather games, and that changes everything.
It does.
And it could happen. It could happen on the road too.
Yeah.
People should take some stats of the people, of the quarterbacks that put up these big numbers. And Aaron Rodgers is he obviously puts up big numbers, and the weather for some reason in Green Bay is a lot milder than it is here, even though they're 2.5 hours, 3 hours north.
Yeah.
But it is a lot milder and not nearly as windy as it gets in Chicago. But a lot of these guys, they're playing in fair weather cities.
Yeah, true.
As compared to here. Now, Josh Allen plays in some tough weather in Buffalo, and he puts up some big numbers. He's gotten to the point, he's grown to the point. And when they had Brian Daboll calling the plays as the offensive coordinator, he didn't give a damn. We're going to do what we want to do regardless of the weather. They got to stop us.
Just digressing here for a point. Would you like to see the Bears move to an indoor facility and play football indoors, or are you a traditionalist and would prefer to see them play cold weather?
Yeah, I think, from a fan standpoint, the fan would love to sit in the Dome Stadium and not have to worry about the elements. From a football standpoint, I think you like it. It creates an advantage, especially if you're playing a southern city, or a southern team late in the season, and they come up because it could be 15 degrees. Say you're playing Miami, and or Jacksonville or somebody, and it's 15 degrees out. 15 degrees to them is like 0 or 3 below because they're just not used to it.
Exactly. Very true.
I will never forget this game. As long as we played Atlanta on a Monday night game, or not a Monday night game, a Sunday night game. And it was in single digits and the wind chill was below 0. They put up the white flag before the first quarter was done, and we blew them out. Well, and it might have been the season we went to the Super Bowl. I don't recall the exact season, but it was in that area. And Michael Vick was the quarterback. But I mean, they showed up for about 2 series, and that was all over. They just couldn't handle the cold weather.
Well, and I was at that Bears Rams game in 2018, and it was so obvious that Jared Goff, the present Detroit Lions quarterback, was not only defeated by the Bears defense, but the weather got to him. He just did not want to be at Soldier Field playing in those conditions against that defense. So combination of harsh weather and a great defense can really help a football team. So yeah, from that standpoint, hey, if the Bears were winning Super Bowls with those elements, I'd be happy. But if they're not going to win Super Bowls, then let's go inside, guys. That's my point of view.
It's funny you mentioned that, Kate, because that morning I did a 3-hour show on the Score, co-host of the Score, and obviously that was the topic of conversation because it was going to be a huge game. I don't remember the weather being all that bad.
Oh, it was. It was. Greg Braggs and I were at that game together, and we froze our nuts off, man. It was bad. It was really, really bad.
Well, what's bad?
Well, I can't remember exactly the temperature, but I think that with the wind chill, it was down to like 0, 2, 3 degrees.
I grew up, I used to ski. So I'd go skiing when it was 5 degrees and 0, and doesn't bother me.
Yeah, typically it doesn't bother me either, but I'm getting old, Greg. I think I've passed you up. You were born at a later date than me, but my body has not aged like your body. I am in health years much older than you. So, all right, let's now talk about this overall roster. How do you feel about it? I mean, clearly there needs to be some improvements. There needs to be more talent. Ryan Poles famously said, we're working with the hand that was dealt to us. But do you think that this talent, as it is now, can bring as many wins than losses, or one more win than a loss, and play above 500?
It's a question mark. You got to be totally honest. Who the hell knows? Yeah. I think based on how they've done things so far, I think they think that the talent is a little better than many of the fans of the media in Chicago think. They're around these guys every day. And one of the reasons being is you haven't seen them go out and sign people.
Right.
Okay. Now, he doesn't want to make a foolish signing. Could they, between now and my opinion would be, probably a week or so before training camp. It's not going to be right now. Could be, but I just don't see it happening. Could they sign another couple guys? Sure. If the money's right, and then go from there. And I'll tell you, there's one thing I want to bring up, just so we don't get through the show without bringing it up. We always talk about, is there a 3 technique? Do we have a 3 technique? And that is a question mark. And I'm looking at the roster last night, and I'm thinking, wait a minute. There might be a guy in there that could be, depending on, what his size is. And they got right now Sam Kamara listed on the Bears website as 288 pounds.
Yeah.
Okay, as a linebacker, but that's wrong. You know, he's a defensive end. And could he, some of these guys that have become pretty good three techniques have been started out as outside players. And they really didn't have that electricity, explosiveness that you needed to play outside, but put him inside and they could be great. And hey, I'm the first one to say I'm throwing a dart at the wall.
Sure.
I'm guessing. I'm just thinking, wait a minute. That might be an option that we haven't talked about. I'm sure they have, because they see the guys, you know, every day and working in the OTAs, the off-season program. And I'm just wondering if that is an option that has been discussed.
I'm sure it's happened during your tenure in the 30-some years working in the NFL, professional football. Do you recall one particular player that you scouted at one position and then the coach says, hey, you know, what about if we move him here? Or maybe you suggested moving him here as an example of that being successful. I mean, I immediately think,
yeah, I do. And you're going to have to look up the name because, you know, at my old age, I don't think as fast all the times I do. But we drafted a guy from Texas to be a defensive end. And in the late 2000s, and he ended up being a Pro Bowl. Henry Melton.
Oh, yes.
Henry Melton. Now, here's a story on Henry Melton. Henry Melton comes into Texas as a running back and had success as a running back.
Wow.
He was a 250, 260-pound running back. Then they moved him to defensive end, had success there. We drafted him to play defensive end. And then once we got him, we go, wow, we could put 15, 20 on this guy and he could be a hell of a three. Wow. And he was until injuries, you know, curtailed him. But he was a Pro Bowl three technique.
He really was, yeah.
And really, outside of Tommy Harris, the best three we had.
That's a great example. And I was thinking of Big Cat Williams. They moved him from the defensive line to offensive tackle.
Well, Big Cat was, you know, before, but Big Cat played in that Division II Pennsylvania league, which actually has got some pretty damn good football players. There's every year there's a couple guys that come out of that league. It's a very competitive league. Small state schools, you know, within the state of Pennsylvania. But Big Cat, I think, played at Cheney State or something, and was a defensive lineman. And he didn't have the quickness and explosiveness to play defensive end or defensive tackle in the National Football League, but he had some of the traits that you needed to play offense, and they saw it, and they moved him over to the offensive side of the ball. You know, they did it with Rashad Coward here a few years ago. And I tell you, when you first looked at Rashad, when he moved over to offense, you thought, you know what, this guy may have a chance. But then, you know, you're looking for the arrow to continue going up, and he just leveled off. He got to a point and leveled off. Never got any better.
I spoke with Danny Shimon the other day, and I asked him what's been going on. He goes, I've been looking at a little bit of tape, and I go, holy cow, you're an addict, man. So I'm using that as a segue to ask you, what is happening with NFL scouting departments right now? I'm assuming they're all on break and not looking at tape like Danny Shimon is. But can you take us through that process? When they get back, what are they doing? As a scouting director, what would you be telling your scouts to do? Give us a portrait of what's happening there now or in the near future.
Well, every team's going to do it differently depending on who's running the scouting department, who the general manager is. I can tell you what I did in New York. I can tell you what, you know, we did here. When I was with New York, we did pro stuff during the summer, during this time of the year.
Okay.
So we studied players that could be potential free agents next year. And the pro departments back then, so this is the 80s and 90s, were not nearly as big as they are now, as far as the number of scouts within the pro department. So we would do pro work and study tape and write reports on the different players in the league. Each guy had about 20, 25 players to do, each scout. And so it would just augment what the pro department had on these guys. When when I was here, we had a larger pro department. And so our college scouts did not get involved on the pro side. I got involved doing pro stuff, but the scouts didn't. What the scouts would do now is just prepare. You're getting paid now. You could take some off time. You can go on vacation, but you're still getting paid. I mean, even if you only work a few hours a day. The main thing we wanted them to do is, especially, they'd map out their schedule, what they were going to do, especially in the month of September, et cetera. So get a look and get a feel for some of these players that they're going to be going into early, but especially look at small school guys.
Mm-hmm.
The guys that are on the combine list from the D3 schools or the low end D2 schools and stuff. And then let me back up a little bit. We didn't tell our scouts that you had to go to this school, that school, and that school.
Mm-hmm.
We let them make the decision. We called them and said, you're the personnel director of your area. You handle the area the way you want to handle the area.
Okay.
Just don't make any mistakes.
Exactly.
Because you're going to be held accountable.
Right.
Okay. So that being said, check out these small schools. Determine if you think you got to make a school call. Mm-hmm. If there's enough talent from that guy, that guy's showing on the previous year's tape, that you think you got to go in and take a look at him and make a school. Because when you make a school call, that's taking up a day of time.
Mm-hmm.
You got to drive to the place. You're spending the day there. You got to wait for practice to start so you can see him. So, and the last thing we wanted was our scouts to have a wasted day. I remember when I was with the Giants, I didn't make my schedule probably the first 12 years I was there.
Okay.
The scouting director made our schedules. So I'd be in some of these small schools, and I'd get there 7:00 in the morning, 7:30 in the morning if it's only one or two guys I had to look at. And at 9:00, you're going, what the hell am I doing here? and you're stuck.
Oh man.
Because we had a set schedule.
Mm-hmm.
And that was and Jerry was there too, so he knew.
Mm-hmm.
So he knew exactly how I felt. And that is a wasted day. And there's not enough days
Absolutely
in the fall to have a wasted day. Mm-hmm. So when we came here, we changed things, and we just said, hey, you're going to make the determination. Now, one of the reasons we did that is this,
mm-hmm.
is if 2 or 3 small school guys turn out to be players in your area,
mm-hmm.
it's a hell of a lot easier to go back in November or December to go to a place where he's a player,
mm-hmm.
versus wasting a day in September. You follow what I'm saying on that?
Absolutely.
You can play catch up a lot easier
mm-hmm.
than wasting a day. And we wanted them to spend the majority of their time at their Power 5 schools, the schools that are productive schools as far as giving players to the National Football League.
Is it easier to scout college talent or to scout pro talent? And if is the approach different?
Approach is different. When you're looking at college talent, you're looking for traits that you can develop, because you don't know how the guy's being coached.
Mm-hmm.
He could be coached in a way, taught how to do things. You're going, why is he doing that? But he's doing what he's told to be doing. And so you're looking, does he have the skill set? Does he have the size? Does he have the feet? Does he have the flexibility, the strength, the power to compete for a job in the National Football League? So you're projecting in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, once he becomes a pro, now he's made it to that level. Now you're looking at it, is he better than what we got?
Gotcha.
Can he make us a better team if we go out and get him? Now, the one thing that every team in the league does to their own detriment is they overrate their own players because you've got a relationship with them. Yeah. Sometimes I think it's almost better to bring in an outside guy to look at your own guys, to be honest.
Interesting.
And, and say, hey, you may love them, but isn't that good?
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because everything that you're saying now, I can relate to it from having worked in corporate America. You've got to sometimes bring in outside consultants is look at my organization and tell me what we're doing wrong or, how we can improve and so forth.
Right, right.
You're just saying that. And a couple of the other things that you said before kind of related it to my previous background in corporate America. So beyond that, so let's fast forward now to actually going to college games. What happens there? And of course, you said that every scouting department handles it differently. But in your most recent experience, there's area scouts, and so they're all planning out, what their schedule is. I'm going to go to this game, going to go to that game.
But let me cut you off a little bit here.
Okay.
Going to a game. When I was with the Giants at first, my boss thought going to games were important. There's other people in the league that feel games are useless.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons being is, especially if you go to a Notre Dame or an Alabama, they've got several players that are prospects on that team. And you might have 3, 4, or 5 on each side of the ball. Well, you don't got 5 sets of eyes. You can't watch all of them every play. So you got to pick and choose. Who am I going to watch this play? And sometimes it has to do with down and distance. Now, where I feel different about that is if it's a quarterback. I want to see a quarterback play live because you see them within the conditions of a game that you can't necessarily catch on tape.
Mm-hmm.
And so how's he reacting to the flow of the game, be it good or bad? How about little side things like how's he react to his teammates on the sideline? How's he react to his coach on the sideline? And watch that interaction.
Yeah.
So things like that. And, there's quarterbacks I've scouted where you see them live and they get to the sideline and they're kind of deadbeats. They sit by themselves. They don't interact with people. And then there's others that try to fire their teammates up.
Mm-hmm.
So I think with quarterbacks, it's imperative that you see them play live. The other positions, sometimes, if you can't get to a practice, okay, if your schedule is set, so your first live look is going to be at a game, then you got to be on the field for the warm-ups.
Mm-hmm.
And watch the guy move around, because then you're seeing, on tape, you're saying, well, he looks like he's 6'5.5" and 320 pounds. But now when you see him in person, is he really that big? And your experience tells you if he is, if he isn't, if he got short arms, does he have long arms? What's his physique like? How's he carry his weight? During the warm-ups, is he just going through the motions, or has he got some effort to him? Things like that. But you can see them move around in a way that you're not going to see on tape.
This is all fascinating to me. It really, really is. And it's incredible. I guess I knew this, but the way you say it, watching guys on the sideline is a big part of a scout's responsibility. That is interesting, because I'm always looking at the sideline too. I'm looking to see, who's chatting it up with other people, who's listening to coaches, who's maybe drifting off and so forth. And you're reading body language and stuff. And so I guess you guys account for all of that too in your scouting reports, huh?
Oh, yeah. And in fact, I'll give you a perfect example. Joe Flacco. Okay. I saw Joe Flacco play twice live And he started off at Pitt, I think, and then transferred to Delaware. Played his final year at Delaware, so he drops down to the FCS level. And his numbers were outstanding. So if you're looking at the game tape and you're looking at the numbers, you say, this is your prototypical pocket passer. Big guy, average mobility, but, a little later in his year, below average mobility. But when he was a college player, but then his interaction was nil on the sideline. He was always by himself. So now it was, okay, that brings up a question. Now we got to spend some time with this guy, especially if we're interested. And I remember Pep Hamilton was the quarterback coach then. And Joe was at the Senior Bowl, if I recall correctly, and Pep got one full evening with him just to get a feel for what's upstairs and his personality.
Interesting.
And Pep and giving Pep a pat on the back, that's one thing where he was really, really good at.
Yeah, he seems like the type of guy who's so personable. He can relate to all sorts of people and probably then articulate that to the rest of the scouting department. We need to get him on the show. Ask him to come out for 15 minutes so we can pick his brain on stuff.
Well, I know one thing. He's vacationing now. What he's doing, I don't know. This time of the year where scouts are still doing some work, coaches, they got another 3.5 weeks. And I tell you, it's a lot of them. They go to Europe, they go to the beach, they go all over. But the last thing they want to do is do football.
Yeah,
because once they get back, and they'll come back 3 or 4 days before camp starts. And then it's 12, 14, 16 hours a day, every day. For the next 6 months. And it is tough.
I can see that for sure. Greg, the other day on one of my other shows, somebody put up on the chat, we need to lose some games so we could get a high draft pick next season. And so in my typical Latin-blooded way, my blood started boiling, and I went off on one of my tangents. No, you got to win every game. You got to win. And I said, you know what? I got to ask Greg this question because he's going to take a much more professional approach to answering this question and a much more controlled response. So the question for you is, how important is it to win now? Or let me rephrase the question. Does it ever enter the mind of a coach, a player, an organization to lose games to improve their scouting position outside of the allegations that happened in Miami with Coach Flores talking about the Miami owner offered him money to tank games? But in your experience, does that even come up?
Okay, throw out that one thing because there's two sides of that story. He said there was, and the other guy said there wasn't.
Right.
That is yet to be determined, and so we don't really know what the real answer is. It is most coaches, all coaches, they're very competitive by nature. Okay, they're former players themselves, and same with the front office. 90%. The guys are they've been involved in competitive sports all their lives. They are competitive. They want to win. Okay, the word tank just doesn't fit in their vernacular at all, or isn't part of their vocabulary. They just it goes against everything they've learned since they first put a uniform on, regardless of the sport. Because you've been taught play hard and win. And it's the same way, in the league, you're going out and try to win. First of all, your job depends upon it. Exactly. Guys are making a bunch of money. Okay. And they're making a lot more money now than they made, when I was doing this, we didn't make nearly the money that the guys are making now.
Sure.
I mean, general managers, there were a few general managers that were making over $1 million, where now general managers are making $4.5 million.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, so do you think he wants to get fired from that job? Hell no. No. And what's going to get him fired? Losing football games.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so and regardless of even if there was an owner that says I would be better off losing this year, well, guess who's going to be held accountable because you lost? Because the fans are going to be crying too.
Mm-hmm.
Is the GM and the coach. So puts them in a no-win situation. Now I'm going to say that holds true until you get in December.
Okay.
Maybe the middle of December.
Mm-hmm.
And now you get into draft position. You start thinking,
okay,
where are we? Well, if we win the rest of our games, we're going to be picking 14th or 15th or something like that. Or if we win 3 out of 4, we're going to be, this is where we're going to be picking. And it's not an easy formula to go through because you got to check on the schedules of the other team and what their records are, strength of schedule and everything else. So it's not an easy exercise to do. And then, okay, what happens if we lose? Okay, the highest we can pick is 5th. And now you've got preliminary stuff. You're not finalized. You don't finalize boards until you get to April. But you know who the best players are. Now, granted, you don't know anything about the medical. You don't have verified measurables. So it's all preliminary. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, well, yeah, we got a chance at this guy, or this guy, assuming everything goes right, goes according to plan. So then it gets into a situation where you could be win by losing or lose by winning. You follow what I'm saying? But
sure.
But you're still, I've had those conversations with the powers that be. Mm-hmm. Never once had the conversation with the coach.
Oh, okay. Well,
because it's like totally separate.
Yeah.
Because the coach, he wants to win. His players want to win.
Yeah.
Hell, their job depends on it. Mm-hmm. Their performance, the eye in the sky don't lie, right?
Exactly.
How they look on tape. Now, here's one thing. Now, and we can use the current Bears new regime, new coaching staff, and new front office. Mm-hmm. What games do you want to look at? I want to look at the games at the end of the season that didn't mean anything. Who was playing hard? So, do you see how that works?
Absolutely. Sure.
Yeah, so when I hear some of this stuff, a lot of it's media talk.
Yeah.
And is it reality? No. At least, and I've been involved in this going back, over 40 years now. And I've never been part of it. It's totally foreign to me. So mm-hmm. I just can't. Does it happen in some places? It may, but you better have a real long contract mm-hmm. and for a lot of money.
Well, and you say it's a media thing, but I got to tell you, a lot of fans always bring it up. I'm hearing fans talk about it now before the season because they look at this season as a rebuilding and let's, since we're going to have all this money next year, let's get higher draft picks and that way. But the thing is,
who the hell knows who's going to be in the draft next year?
Exactly.
You don't know what underclassmen are going to be in the draft, mm-hmm. and you can look at mock drafts now. Those are totally worthless mm-hmm. because I guarantee you look at those things and half to 2/3 of those names won't even be players that you're really considering come next April. Mm. So it's all I call it fantasy football. It means nothing.
I also think that, listen, you don't want that disease to infect your clubhouse. The even entertaining the thought that you're not playing to win. Secondly, is if you're playing to win, you might discover that some of the guys on your roster are the answer. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, you know, throwing a guy out there like Equanimous St. Brown, someone that you have a hope in and have said on this show that he could be a breakout player, that's not playing to lose. That's playing to win, to see if this guy can help take you to the Super Bowl. So,
right. No, there's no question. There's no question.
All right.
I hate when people start saying, well, let's start playing some of these young guys so we can find out if they can play. Well, I understand in the last couple games,
Sure,
if it's already you're out of the playoffs, etc., and there's and you know that there's certain players they're coming out of contract. You're not going to re-sign them because of age or money or whatever. You already know in that. Now, I can go back to your question from 40 minutes ago. Okay, what do scouting departments do? Well, what I particularly did is when I was scouting director is I started looking at players in so-called need positions. Because, coming out of the draft, coming out of free agency, you already know, okay, this guy's contract's up, this guy's contract's going to be up, this guy's contract's going to be up, and chances are we're not going to bring him back. So you've already got that in your mind. Okay, now, does it happen 100% that way? No, but probably 75% that those guys aren't going to be brought back. You could say the same, going into last year, you knew Allen Robinson wasn't going to be around this year. So you've got to start, looking at receivers or whatever. And that doesn't mean you're going to take them in the first round, but you've got to get an idea of what the top and the middle of the draft are going to look like at those positions. Now, what you don't know, and was easier actually when I was there, because you didn't have, until the last year I was a scouting director, you only have 35 to 40 juniors in the draft. Well, hell, now you got 120. It's loaded with underclassmen. So you're just throwing a dart at the wall if you think you can go through and study all those kids, and you don't know. You could be wasting your time. You might not be wasting your time because you don't know. You don't know what kind of year they're going to have, how healthy they're going to be. Is there going to be a change in their coaching staff? Is the head coach at the college they're at going to be fired? And that could make their decision easy. You know what? I don't want to play for a new coach and a new staff and a new system. I'm going to enter the draft.
I've got a question that I think we could spend an hour on, but I'll ask it and maybe we could just spend a couple of minutes on it. Do you think that the NFL should expand, add another couple of teams? Do you think there's enough talent out in the football world to be able to accommodate 2 new franchises in the NFL?
No. Without question. I don't know if there's enough talent for 32 teams right now.
I'm glad to hear you say that, man, because I feel the same way.
No, I think we've reached saturation point. Now, I think that I was a firm believer. I got why the league stopped paying for it. We had NFL Europe as a minor league type thing, and there's players that came out of NFL Europe that turned into be pretty good players. And we could send players over there for development, guys who were either practice squad guys or guys who are on your team that got very little playing time, except for maybe, special teams or, for linemen, say PAT, an extra point, something like that. So you wanted to get them some playing time. And that was good. So I think that whether it's going to be the XFL coming back next spring or the USFL, who knows, but there's got to be a tie-in between the league and one of those, between the NFL and one of those leagues to where you've got an opportunity. See, I personally think that the NFL should be able to send some players to, say, the XFL for development, like we did with NFL Europe. Yeah, NFL Europe was owned wholly by the NFL, and the reason that they stopped it is it just became too expensive.
Mm-hmm.
That was, coaching staffs and players you had to pay, and they were over in Europe and everything else. And so finally they just said, we're not going to foot the bill for that anymore. But the use you got out of it was great. Well, and we were having those discussions with not necessarily the league office, but with people when I was working for the XFL, but front office people in the NFL. And they were sending people to our games and watching our practices and stuff. And where they wanted us to succeed, pandemic happened. And otherwise, the original XFL or the original XFL 2.0, we would have been finishing our third season a few weeks ago.
That's right.
But they wanted us to succeed, and they wanted a tie-in where they could send a half a dozen players.
Yeah. Well, your perspective on this is appreciated even more because of your experience at the XFL. And so you got a really strong look at the talent that was available at that level. And I think you DM'd me once about a couple of players, that I said, yeah, NFL teams should look at this player, that player. And then you DM'd me and said, no, although those guys suck. There just wasn't a lot of talent there, but I agree with you. The NFL needs to work something out with the XFL or the other league that's playing football right now. All right, I want to move on to some questions. Last week, before we get to these questions, Mr. Shorty, who I don't see is here today, but he asked a question about the drafting of Cedric Benson, and there is a blogger in town who kind of maybe didn't interpret the words that you had. So I wanted to ask
Blowhard Eric Lambert, who doesn't have a ass, doesn't know his ass from a hole in the ground.
And then someone
write that one up, Eric. Yeah, how about this? Eric has had me blocked on Twitter for better than 5 years. But he listens to every one of these podcasts.
I've never met him personally, but I've had some cordial interactions with him. But yeah, it's sometimes some of the stuff he writes may not totally reflect what somebody said. But I just wanted to throw that out in case you had a message from, and I think the message has been delivered. All right, let's look at some of these questions here. Let's go to Michael first. Greg, how many of the drafted offensive linemen this year will make the 53-man roster? Personally, I'd like to see one more of these guys make it instead of Peterman.
Well, I'll go to the first part or the last part first. Peterman could very well be cut and put on the practice squad. And, they've got rules now in the practice squad where used to be, after you reached a certain point in your career, you weren't eligible to be on the practice squad. But they've changed the rules, and you can have X number of players, like 2 or 3 of your players on the practice squad can be veteran players, like a Peterman. And that very well could be the case. The only problem you're having is that if both Fields and Trevor Siemian got hurt in the course of a game, who's going to play? It's strictly a safety precaution. Everybody's got 3 quarterbacks. A lot of them, the third is on the practice squad. Now, if they continue the rule where they've done it the last 2 years because of COVID, and they had success with it, so I assume they're going to continue to do it. Then on Friday or Saturday, you can bring up, just flip out some guys that are on the practice squad with the 53 or whatever, and just bring a guy up for the game. So he ends up getting a 53-man roster check because he's on the squad for that one day. Versus a practice squad check, you could do that. If they continue to do that, I'm fine with Peterman being on the practice squad. Okay, you're also though taking the risk that somebody could poach him. But that's just want to look at it from all sides. So you discuss all sides. Reality, they drafted 4. I think there's a good chance 3 of them could be on the 53 if they keep 9 linemen. And it used to be that you only kept 8 linemen. The last 2 years, most teams have been going more towards 9, and that does not include your deep snapper. He's technically a lineman, but he's a special teamer. He's a specialist. So I think 3. I'm not as personally high on the kid, the center, who's a local kid from the University of Illinois. I think he's more of a practice squad guy. I like the upside of the other guys. I think Tyree Carter from Southern has got a lot of upside. I think the kid from San Diego State has got a lot of upside. Guys that could, if you took them in the 4th round, you wouldn't have bitched about it. And the tackle from Southern Utah, that's a talented kid.
Yeah.
And he may end up starting. I mean, we'll find that out in another 2 months. But right now I think 3. The worst, there's going to be 2.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be 3.
Interesting. Okay. Nomad almost has a follow-up to this. He says, would you start a rookie at left tackle? And
why not? If he's ready to play.
Have you seen a rookie left tackle, especially like a mid-round left tackle, succeed immediately? It's rare, but it has happened. And you go back to Charles Leno. You really got your money's worth out of Leno, given that he was a 7th rounder and he didn't miss hardly a game in his 5.
He didn't miss any games.
Right. He may not have been the best left tackle in the NFL, but he was serviceable. That's for sure.
No, he didn't start, I think, until his 2nd year.
Okay.
But, hey, if the guy is ready to play, if he proves he's ready to play, play him.
And he can be helped by the coaching.
I was watching, who was it, Green Bay the other day, because they always have those Green Bay games on, the reruns on the NFL Network.
Yeah. And
there's a guy playing left tackle a good part of the second half of the season. That was now he's in his 3rd or 4th year now, 3rd year. But he was a rookie free agent, not a draft choice, and a talented kid. He's got a future in the league.
All right. Back to Michael. He's got another question. He says he liked Henry Melton and wants to know, what do you think about Robert Quinn? Will he show up or hold out for a trade? All of us would hate to lose Robert Quinn. And I'll add to that question is, what happens to this team if they are forced, because Quinn makes it obvious that he doesn't want to play for a team that's rebuilding, or he perceives as rebuilding? What happens to this defensive line if they lose Robert Quinn and end up with a future draft pick instead of somebody that can help them immediately?
Well, number one, I'd like to see Quinn here. I could see a scenario like this, that if the season isn't going, that he's here, he's playing, and if the season isn't going well, that it's like a Von Miller situation last year where he got traded from Denver to LA at the trade deadline or right before the trade deadline. And Denver got a pretty good haul for that, especially because Von Miller was playing pretty good. And, I could see a situation like that. Is he going to be the type to hold up the team? I don't know that, because I don't know Robert Quinn.
Right.
He hasn't had a history of that. He hasn't had that diva type personality, attitude.
Right.
So I don't know what's going to happen. That one idiot on Twitter here, he said this week that the Bears got to deal with Pittsburgh. Yeah, sure they do. Come on, give me a frickin' break.
That's funny.
I know. Here's rule number one. If they want to trade him, Ryan Poles isn't the guy to make the first call. Let somebody call him, because you are dealing from weakness if you make the call. I call you and I say, Quinn's not here. I got to move him. He doesn't want to be here. What do you give me? Oh, I'll give you a 7th. Oh, I got to get a 4th. Well, you got to get rid of him. Why should I give you a 4th?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? You're dealing from weakness. That's
Yeah.
like rule number 1 in making a trade. Don't make the call. Take the call.
Oh, that's a great philosophy. All right. I got another good question here. This one from Jordan. We were actually talking about Lovie Smith the other day on the Dan and Aldo show, and then Jordan came on to share his thoughts about Lovie Smith's tenure with the Chicago Bears. And his question here is, if you could talk about the core tenets of Lovie's defensive scheme, that 3-tech, that will linebacker, and that safety, and what Urlacher's presence did to change Lovie's philosophy. And do you think this ties into Flus's philosophy at all?
Well, I can't speak for Flus. And we've talked about it a number of times. Flus is far more sophisticated with this defense than Lovie ever was, as far as what he does with it. And when Lovie came in, and we've told the story, I got to have a 3 technique, and we didn't have a 3 technique. We had a totally different type of defense under Greg Blasch's defensive coordinator, which was a 4-3, but really with big, 2-gap 3-4 principles. If you look at those guys, the only guy that didn't have monster size was Alex Brown. All those other guys were well over 300 pounds, and 2 of them were well over 350 pounds. We're being nice saying they were 350 pounds. But they couldn't play in Lovie's scheme. So, and, when Lovie first got here, the key was I got to have a will. And he didn't know if he had a will because he saw the time speed of Lance Briggs, which was 4.77 or something at the combine. And, that's too slow. But we told him, and he went with us, hey, he's going to be fine. He plays 4.55. And that turned out, we were correct. I think once he saw Brian in action, that, then it's like, okay, I got a bonus. And so I can do more. And it really helped coverage because Brian was so good in coverage. And Briggs was very good in coverage. But between the two of them, we had some great players at Will and Mike, and both as against the run and in coverage. If there's a weak point to Brian Urlacher's game is that he wasn't a great or dominant. I'm not going to say that. He wasn't a dominant pass rusher. He was a good pass rusher, but he didn't dominate from that. But everything else he did, and don't forget he was a safety in college. So we had a lot of experience in coverage coming out of college, out of University of New Mexico. And he could play that deep middle, or that middle third of the defense so well and take things away from the opposing teams. First, because of his size, and second, because of his awareness. So I think to answer Jordan's question, really, it made the defense that much better because he didn't have one guy. He basically had like 2 wills. And that he could do a lot with then. And Bob Babich had a lot to do with it. Bob Babich was a great linebacker coach. He didn't do as well as the coordinator, but as a linebacker coach, there's very few that are as good as Bob Babich. And that's why Urlacher had him present him in the Hall of Fame. He knew.
Yeah. 2 more questions and we'll get out of here. Nomad asks, from what you know, what you've seen, who is going to be the right guard, or who is most suited, is the way he phrased it, to play that right guard position for the Chicago Bears?
I don't know who it's going to be. I suspect one of Tevin Jenkins and Larry Warren. One's going to be a tackle, one's going to be at right guard, and I think the rookie's going to be at left tackle.
Yeah, I'm thinking Tevin is going to be at that right guard position, but
Tevin is the more athletic of the 2.
Yeah.
And so you think, well, you put him at tackle, but not necessarily because you got that outside zone scheme where the guards got to play in space
Mm-hmm.
and pull and things. And so it might be more beneficial for him to be the guard instead of Bourne.
Mm. All right, last question. Chris, when we were talking about scouting, he asked this question: did you ever have a particular college you just dreaded to go to?
Didn't like going to?
That's right.
Penn State.
Why is that? Pleasant Valley. Why?
I love the area.
Mm-hmm.
I liked the school. Joe Paterno was the head coach.
Mm-hmm.
He was a flaming dickhead. He made it. He made it very difficult
Mm-hmm.
I wrote an article in the National Football Post about it. I got 3 calls from one general manager and a player personnel director and a scout about thank you.
Oh, good.
After and it was, he just made it awful on every scout that came into that school. First of all, he'd only open up, like a lot of schools are open all the time. George Perlis was head coach at Michigan State for a number of years. Great guy. George would say to us, he goes, I wish I had 8 to 10 scouts here every day. Why is that? He goes, because I know I'm going to have a good practice.
That is great.
Okay. George, though, coached in the NFL. So he knew that, hey, these kids are going to practice hard when there's scouts there. Paterno didn't want anybody there. And he'd only open up for a week of the whole season. He'd open up for a week for scouts to come in. And then a lot of times you'd get there, let's say, a lot of times they didn't do anything on Monday or whatever. So you got Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. You get there and he goes, no, we're shutting it today. And you're already there. So now you can't do anything. And it's not like Penn State was an easy place to get to. It's like a 3-hour drive from through the back roads from Pittsburgh and 2 hours from Philadelphia. It's just a pain. Just it's in the center of the state. And if you ever been in Pennsylvania, the topography of Pennsylvania, it's not like it's flat like Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
So you got the Allegheny Mountains running through there. And he just, miserable. And then you couldn't trust a word anybody told you there because Joe had the company line. They were all, you tell them they're a great kid. They work hard. And you couldn't get the right background information because it was an edict. So you never knew. So, you had to do some real digging. And then the pro days were atrocious. He'd schedule the pro days for like 4 p.m. You couldn't watch tape leading up. And the last damn plane out of there was at like 6 o'clock.
Oh my God.
So it was really just, it got to a point where I said, screw it. I'm not going here anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I stopped going. Wow. I said, I'll do them on the road. They're not going to do me. They're not going to give me any information.
Mm-hmm.
So, know what I did? I'd go to Michigan State or something. And if they played at Michigan State or they played at Illinois, I'd go to those schools. I'd watch their tape at those schools. I'd go to the game. I could see their players in warm-ups like we talked about earlier in the show. And it didn't matter if I talked to the coaches because they were going to lie to me anyway.
That is
that's a long answer, but it only took me about a 1/10 of a second to come up with the school that I hated going to.
Well, Chris gets our award for question of the day. A great question. And that what a disservice to his players to run that kind of environment that's not helping his players with NFL.
There were parents that got up in arms. And talk to Robbie Gold. He went there. He knew how pissed off some of the parents got. And finally basically called out Joe. It was and then he opened things up, but he was still just a miserable son of a bitch.
Well put. All right. I think I got all our questions out of the way. Yeah, I think so. We were hacked by some organization that sells sex. And I'm not going to post any of their messages up on the screen unless they're going to send us some money to pay for our bills. But really annoying the amount of bull crap that was up on the chat. So apologize for that. We'll work with YouTube to get rid of those people. And Don Burr has one last thing. He says, can I get a Detroit versus everybody from you and Greg? This is our resident Detroit Lions fan.
But what's he want to know?
He wants to know why the Detroit Lions suck so badly. Any advice?
I've had some friends that have worked at Detroit, and good people. I don't know any of the Fords personally, so I've always hoped that they, would do well. I mean, obviously, when I came here, became a rival team, you want to beat them.
Mm-hmm.
I just think they haven't been run well. Mm-hmm. And are they going to be done? I know I knew Dan Campbell. We drafted Dan Campbell when I was in New York. I haven't talked to Dan Campbell since he was a player in New York. So I don't know what he's like now. For his sake, I hope he does well.
Yeah.
But it's been, guys like Marinelli. Marinelli is a great coach. Mm. He died in Detroit.
Yeah, he sure did.
And it's, it's happened before. So I don't know. I mean, some teams are just destined for that. And I don't know if it's ownership or what. Now, you got Mr. Ford's not around. Mrs. Ford is not involved. You got one of the kids. I think it's one of the daughters who's more involved as the, quote, owner. You got a different general manager was brought in a year ago. Maybe it's going to be different this time around. Who knows? It's like, let's wait and see what happens.
I will say this about the Lions. They have a good opportunity to control the line of scrimmage in most of their games. That offensive line that they've built, they've got 5 really good starters. The depth isn't quite there for me. The defensive line has got some potential. They drafted Hutchinson out of Michigan, but outside of that, there aren't, any star players that I can think of. Any thoughts about their line of scrimmage?
I don't know the talent that well. I'd have to really sit down and study it to say. I spend my time on the Bears, the Bills, the Colts. If Detroit becomes a decent team, then I'll start studying them. But right now, it's like, I put the Bears up with 2 W's every time and if they lose a game, then I'm pissed off.
And Don Burr, I'm sure Greg would be happy to give you a detailed scouting report on the Lions. Just send a check first, and then he will give you a
open check.
An open check. Holy cow! I told you this guy was
blank check with a signature on the bottom.
There you go. All right, Greg, this has been fun.
Anything you want to know then.
That's right. You'll get scouting reports and inside stories. This has been fabulous. Another great Gabriel Talks football show. We are going to take about 3 or 4 weeks off. Greg, I hope
can't be 4 weeks. We'll be in the training camp.
So 3 weeks off.
And the rookies report on what, like the 22nd or something like that?
Yes, the 22nd is correct. Yes. So
okay,
we'll be back. I think
we're right around then. We want to, and if there's going to be any new players,
yes,
that'll happen probably right before the veterans come in, like 3 days later in that area. So that's 3 weeks from now. Okay. You might see some roster changes. We'll see. Who knows? That's going to be up to Ryan Poles and Flues.
Yeah, but trust me, if there's anything urgent that pops up, even if I'm in San Diego, which is where I'm headed for vacation, I'm calling you up and we'll do a show with me by the pool and you wherever you are. And we'll talk about the breaking news.
The Score did a thing, with Spiegel and Parkins from that sports book place out in Las Vegas by the pool. They did 2 weeks there, 1 week in the fall and 1 week, I think, this spring. And they were right by the pool the whole show.
and they came back fatter and with a lot less money in their wallet, I bet.
I couldn't tell you.
I did listen to a couple of those shows. That was very entertaining. All right, so that is it. And I just want to remind people that we've got some baseball coverage coming up. Do you like this baseball player, Shohei Ohtani? He's pitching against the White Sox tonight, Greg. What do you think?
I'm not a big baseball fan.
Okay, well, this guy is he pitches and he hits home runs.
Yeah, I know. What's his third year in the league or second?
I think it's his third. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. He can play outfield too, and you can pitch him on Monday, and he can play outfield the rest of the week, and then pitch again the next week. It's whatever his turn in the rotation is. And in the meantime, he'll hit 40 home runs.
Exactly. So Vinny Parisi has deemed it Shohei Ohtani Day. And so his show at 2 p.m. is going to cover Ohtani versus the White Sox. And then later tonight at 10 p.m., the premiere of Jordan Silvera's Bare Necessities. That is it for us. If you want to know what our schedule is, I'll still be operating our Barroom Network Twitter account. That's the best way to stay on top of things. And also follow Greg Gabriel at Greg Gabe on Twitter. Greg, you're the best. We will see you soon.
See you later. Thanks, guys.